Imagine a car so powerful, so advanced, or so dangerous that it had to be wiped from history. These 12 American cars were designed, tested, and in some cases even produced, only to be erased before the world could see them. Why were they silenced? Who was behind it? And did any of them escape? Buckle up, because this mystery is deeper than you think. The 1970 Mercury Marauder X100 was one of those rare muscle machines that never quite fit into the mold, which may be exactly why it faded into obscurity. It was Mercury's last bold attempt to fuse brute muscle car power with full-size personal luxury, something aimed not at teenage thrill-seekers, but at mature drivers who still wanted performance, but with a touch of class. Underneath its smooth, elegant lines was a factory hot rod with a 429 cubic inch Cobra Jet V8 capable of putting serious power to the pavement. It wasn't just fast for its size, it was fast, period. And yet, almost no one remembers it. The Marauder name had existed in the Mercury lineup since the early 60s, typically representing the performance end of the full-size segment. But by 1969 and especially 1970, it returned as a standalone coupe offered in two trims, the standard Marauder and the upscale Marauder X100. The X100 was the halo version, packing the big 429 four-barrel engine with 360 horsepower and gobs of torque, along with a distinctive fastback-style roofline borrowed from the Ford XL and Galaxy Sports roof. It featured hidden headlamps, bucket seats, a center console, dual exhaust, power everything, and unique styling touches like rear fender skirts and turbine wheel covers. It was fast, quiet, and unexpectedly refined, a gentleman's muscle car built for a very specific kind of buyer. And that's part of the reason why it failed. The car was a contradiction in many ways. It had all the horsepower of a street brawler, but was cloaked in a body that looked more country club than drag strip. At over 4,300 pounds, it was a heavy beast, but that didn't stop it from lighting up the rear tires when pushed. Owners recall that with just a quick stab of the throttle, the Marauder could smoke the tires and leave behind a surprising trail of burnt rubber and disbelief, especially from people who underestimated what it was capable of. But despite its performance credentials and upscale execution, the Marauder X100 came at precisely the wrong time. In 1970, the muscle car market was starting to feel pressure from rising insurance premiums, tightening emissions regulations, and an uncertain economy. Buyers who wanted speed were flocking to smaller, lighter machines like the Mustang, Camaro, or Chevelle SS. Those who wanted luxury were drifting toward Cadillac, Lincoln, or personal coupes like the Thunderbird. The Marauder X100 fell into a narrow and shrinking gap, too big and plush for young buyers, too aggressive and obscure for luxury car shoppers. Former owners often describe it as the car nobody knew about. It got overlooked at the time, and it's still overlooked today. One former owner once said, "It could burn rubber like a Charger, but rode like a Lincoln. I parked next to GTOs and got zero respect. People didn't know what it was." And that about sums it up. The Marauder X100 didn't look like your typical muscle car. It looked more like something a businessman in a suit would drive, not a guy with a leather jacket and drag strip ambitions. But when that 429 fired up, the car made its presence known. It was a sleeper of the highest order, quiet, dignified, and blisteringly fast when pushed. Sales were dismal. Mercury only built the Marauder X100 for one model year in 1970, and fewer than 6,000 were produced. By 1971, it was gone from the lineup completely, replaced by more conservative full-size sedans and coupes as Mercury repositioned itself in the market. Over time, the Marauder X100 simply vanished from the public consciousness. It didn't help that most people confused it with the later Marauders of the early 2000s, or lumped it in with forgettable luxury barges. The original X100 was different. It had genuine performance chops hidden beneath a luxury shell. Today, finding a 1970 Marauder X100 is nearly impossible. Survivors are rare, and few have been restored. The aftermarket never embraced it like it did for Mustangs or Chevelles, and parts can be difficult to source. But for those in the know, it's a unicorn, a full-size factory muscle car that didn't need loud stripes or scoops to prove its point. It was built for drivers who didn't care about drag strip glory or magazine covers. They just wanted something that could run hard, cruise quiet, and stand apart from the crowd. The Marauder X100 remains one of Mercury's most unique creations, a misunderstood masterpiece of muscle and manners. And like many great cars of its era, it came and went too quickly, leaving behind only whispers, old photos, and the lingering scent of tire smoke in the minds of those lucky enough to have driven one. The 1964 Oldsmobile Jetstar I is one of those cars that time seems to have left behind, but not because it wasn't important. On the contrary, this full-sized V8-powered coupe marked a pivotal transition moment in American performance history, an overlooked stepping stone between the tail-fin-heavy luxury cruisers of the early 1960s and the rowdy mid-sized muscle machines that would soon define the era. But unlike the Pontiac GTO or Chevy Chevelle SS, the Jetstar I didn't get immortalized in posters or vinyl model kits. It came in quietly, made a serious point, and disappeared before the world knew what to make of it. When Oldsmobile introduced the Jetstar I in 1964, they had something big in mind, literally and figuratively. This was a full-size two-door hardtop built on the same B-body platform as the Starfire, but with a mission of cutting away excess luxury in favor of performance. You still got a plush interior and flashy styling cues like brushed aluminum side trim and Jetstar-specific badging, but the focus shifted from chrome to horsepower. Under the hood, Olds dropped in their 394 cubic inch ultra-high compression Rocket V8, an iron block monster putting out 345 horsepower and a stump-pulling 440 lb-ft of torque. That wasn't just competitive, it was more powerful than many of its big block GM cousins at the time. But while the engine had the muscle to keep up with just about anything on the boulevard, the Jetstar I fell into an awkward spot. Priced at over $3,500, not far behind a Cadillac. It was too expensive for younger hot rodders, yet not luxurious enough to attract the Starfire crowd or Buick buyers who wanted more chrome and creature comforts. Worse, it only came with the 3-speed roto-hydromatic automatic transmission. No 4-speed manual, no real sports suspension upgrades. It had speed, but it lacked the raw, gear-banging excitement that Pontiac was about to unleash with the 389 power GTO in the intermediate-sized Tempest. Then there was the name. Jetstar I sounded futuristic and fast, maybe too futuristic. It lacked the punchy simplicity of 442, which would come a year later and become a performance icon. And while Pontiac had a clear mission for its GTO, take a lightweight car and drop in a big engine, Oldsmobile wasn't quite sure what it wanted the Jetstar to be. Was it a sports luxury car? A Starfire with less glitter? A muscle car for executives? That lack of identity led to a confused marketing push, and the Jetstar I simply didn't get the spotlight it needed to succeed. That's not to say it didn't have fans. Enthusiasts who drove them remembered the Jetstar I as a surprisingly quick and smooth ride for such a large car. The big Rocket V8 delivered immense torque right off the line, making it feel lighter than it was. The handling, though not sports car sharp, was better than expected for its size. And the styling, with its long, lean proportions, split grille, and clean roofline, was quietly handsome. It didn't scream for attention the way a Riviera or Grand Prix did, but it had a presence, something that felt solid, confident, like it was built for people who knew exactly what they wanted, even if the rest of the world didn't notice. But sales were modest. Around 16,000 units were produced for 1964, and Oldsmobile pulled the plug after just one model year. In 1965, they launched the 442 as part of the Cutlass line, a more affordable, smaller, lighter car that better fit the emerging muscle car blueprint. It offered more options, a manual gearbox, and could be dressed up or down depending on your taste. It quickly overshadowed its predecessor, and the Jetstar I slipped into obscurity. Today, the Jetstar I is one of the rarest classic Oldsmobiles from the 1960s. Few were saved, fewer still were restored, and the parts market is almost non-existent. Ask a casual muscle car fan about it, and chances are they'll mistake it for a later Oldsmobile Jetstar '88, a completely different, lower performance car. At most car shows, you'll be lucky to find even a single example. And if you do, it'll probably be parked between more famous nameplates, quietly reminding those who stop and look that before the 442, before the muscle car craze exploded, Oldsmobile was already testing the waters. Some owners affectionately refer to the Jetstar warranty as the forgotten father of the 442. And that's not an exaggeration. Without the lessons learned from the Jetstar, how to package performance, how to market power, what buyers wanted and didn't, Oldsmobile might never have found the right formula. The Jetstar was the trial balloon, the prototype in disguise, the performance heavyweight that came just a year too early to catch the wave. And in that sense, it deserves far more recognition than it gets. Because while it may not have stuck around long enough to become a legend, it played a crucial role in shaping one. The 1975 Chevrolet Cosworth Vega is one of the most fascinating and misunderstood cars to come out of Detroit in the 1970s. A truly oddball experiment born from a mix of ambition, desperation, and genuine engineering passion. It's the kind of car that makes gearheads stop and blink when they read the specs. A lightweight compact coupe with a British-built, all-aluminum, twin-cam, 16-valve, fuel-injected engine that revved like a race car, and it wore a Vega badge. By the mid-1970s, the performance car market in America was crumbling. Muscle cars were dying off thanks to emissions regulations, rising insurance costs, and skyrocketing gas prices. At the same time, small, sporty European cars, like the BMW 2002, Alfa Romeo GTV, and Datsun 510, were earning respect as agile, well-built, fun-to-drive machines. GM wanted in on that action. Their answer? Take their subcompact Vega, which had been maligned for rust issues and engine problems, and infuse it with some real performance DNA. Enter Cosworth Engineering of Northampton, England. Known for their race-winning engines in Formula One and IndyCar, Cosworth was tapped by Chevrolet to develop a high-performance version of the Vega's aluminum inline four. The result was nothing short of exotic. A 2.0-liter twin-cam engine with 16 valves, forged aluminum pistons, stainless steel headers, Bendix electronic fuel injection, which was still cutting edge in 1975, and a high-revving 6,500 RPM redline. It made just over 110 horsepower, which doesn't sound like much today, but was strong for a 2,800-pound car in the mid-70s, especially one with such sophisticated internals. To match the engine, Chevy outfitted the Cosworth Vega with a 4-speed close-ratio gearbox, upgraded suspension, stiffer springs, front and rear sway bars, and an aluminum drive shaft. They also gave it unique black and gold paint, gold-painted wheels, special badging, engine-turned dash trim, and full instrumentation. It was meant to be the American equivalent of the hot European coupes, something that could carve corners and cruise in style. On paper, it should have been a hit. The problem? Price. At over $6,000 when new, the Cosworth Vega was almost double the price of a base Vega and within striking distance of the Chevrolet Corvette. That sticker shock alone scared off most buyers. Who in their right mind would pay that much for a car that still looked like the economy coupe their neighbor used to haul groceries? Even worse, the car's performance didn't quite live up to expectations. Early prototypes had promised 140-plus horsepower, but by the time the engine passed U.S. emission standards, the output was trimmed to around 110. That still gave the Cosworth Vega good acceleration and excellent handling compared to other American compacts. But in an era where people still remember GTOs and Boss 429s, it wasn't enough to set hearts racing. The car was quick, but not fast. Only about 2,000 units were sold in 1975, and Chevy built another 1,400 or so for 1976, many of which sat on dealer lots unsold. GM quietly ended production after 2 years. The Cosworth Vega never caught on. To the average buyer, it looked like just another Vega. And the Vega's reputation, rightly or wrongly, was already tainted by rust issues, overheating engines, and poor quality control from the early production years. No amount of gold pinstriping or Cosworth badging could erase that from people's minds. But to those who actually owned and drove them, the Cosworth Vega was something special. Former owners talk about the tight, eager steering, the distinctive rasp of the Cosworth engine as it climbed into the upper rev range, in the sense that this car was different, not just for what it was, but for what it tried to be. It was a world-class engine stuffed into a humble shell, a Hail Mary from GM to prove they could still innovate in the face of adversity. Today, the Cosworth Vega is a true oddity in the collector car world. It's a cult classic among Chevy diehards and vintage compact enthusiasts. Because so few were made, and fewer still survived in stock condition, it's rare to see one at a car show. But when you do, it usually draws a small crowd, not because of its performance, but because of the audacity of the idea behind it. It may not have been the best performing car of its day. It may not have shaken up the world the way GM hoped, but the Cosworth Vega was brave, it was weird, and it was trying. And in a decade full of beige boredom and regulatory retreat, that alone makes it worth remembering. The 1969 Pontiac Executive is one of those nearly invisible classics, overshadowed in its day, overlooked in ours, and remembered mostly by those who either sold them new or inherited them by accident. It was a full-size car with real potential, carrying all the traits people loved about late 60s Pontiacs: big engines, confident styling, a smooth ride, and well-appointed interiors. But despite all of that, it never found its niche. It lived in the strange no-man's land between the Catalina and the Bonneville, and though it had the bones of a great cruiser, it faded into obscurity without ever getting a chance to stand in the spotlight. Pontiac created the Executive in 1967 to bridge what they thought was a gap between the entry-level Catalina and the premium Bonneville. But in truth, that gap barely existed. Buyers either went with the affordable practicality of the Catalina or splurged on the luxury and image of the Bonneville. The Executive ended up a car nobody specifically walked into a dealership to buy. It wasn't just a matter of branding, it was a matter of timing. By 1969, the American full-size car market was nearing saturation. Ford, Chevy, Dodge, and Buick all had entries in every trim level, and consumers were getting choosy, preferring clear, differentiated models. The Executive's very name seemed vague, and the marketing didn't help. Pontiac failed to define who this car was for. Was it for rising middle-class families, older empty nesters, suburban professionals? Nobody could say. Despite the confusion, the 1969 Executive had a lot going for it. It rode on GM's full-size B-body platform and looked nearly identical to a Catalina or Bonneville at a glance. Standard power came from Pontiac's 400 cubic inch V8, offering plenty of grunt for daily driving. Optional was the more potent 428 cubic inch big block that could be had with up to 390 horsepower in high output form, an engine that made this big cruiser a real sleeper in stoplight duels. You could get it as a two-door coupe, four-door sedan, or even as a station wagon, which added real versatility to the mix. The styling was peak late 60s Pontiac, sharp body lines, hidden wipers, a formal grille flanked by vertically stacked headlights, and subtle bright work that gave it just enough flash without seeming gaudy. Inside, you had the usual Pontiac attention to detail, high-quality vinyl and cloth options, a padded dashboard, full instrumentation, optional air conditioning, wood grain trim, and if you ordered right, bucket seats and a console-shifted automatic that made it feel more like a Grand Prix than a family sedan. Former owners who remember the Executive often describe it as everything you needed and nothing you didn't. It could haul 6 people in comfort, tow a boat or trailer without breaking a sweat, and cruise at 80 mph all day with the big 428 barely breaking a sweat. But it didn't have the identity or enthusiasm behind it to make people cherish it. That was part of its downfall. While models like the GTO captured hearts and headlines, and even the Bonneville enjoyed a reputation as Pontiac's top-of-the-line boulevard cruiser, the Executive was the forgotten child in between, functional but faceless. Many buyers who ended up with Executives did so almost accidentally. Maybe the dealership didn't have a Catalina in stock, or maybe the extra cost of a Bonneville seemed just out of reach. They were well-built, well-equipped, and powerful, but they weren't halo cars or muscle machines. They were workhorses, bought and used until they wore out. And when they did, they were traded in or sent to scrap without ceremony. Even within Pontiac circles, the Executive rarely gets a mention. It has no performance packages that collectors lust after, no famous race pedigree, and no pop culture exposure. It didn't appear in movies or on posters. It wasn't the hero of any story. But to those who owned one, it was often their first exposure to a big American car that combined real power with quiet comfort. For them, it was more than a placeholder between trim levels. It was a reliable daily driver with a hidden edge, a sleeper that just needed someone to believe in it. Today, finding a 1969 Pontiac Executive in decent shape is a serious challenge. Most didn't survive the 1980s. They were too large, too thirsty, and not valuable enough to preserve. Even at classic car shows, you'll find more GTOs than Executives by 100 to 1. Try to find a parts catalog or a reproduction emblem for one, you'll likely be out of luck. They simply don't exist in the collector ecosystem in the way other Pontiacs do. And yet, the 1969 Executive is a perfect emblem of its era. A time when American manufacturers built cars not just for niches, but to cover every imaginable shade of the middle class. It was a car that asked for little, delivered a lot, and never complained when it was overlooked. If that's not the most American car story of all time, I don't know what is. The 1957 Dodge Custom Royal Lancer D500 is one of those rare and intriguing vehicles from the late 1950s that almost faded into obscurity. Despite its remarkable performance and cutting-edge engineering, it never achieved the recognition it deserved. A blend of luxury and muscle, this car was a bold experiment that ultimately didn't capture the public's imagination in the way Dodge had hoped. Now, decades later, it's become a ghost of the past, hardly ever seen and largely forgotten by most car enthusiasts. Dodge, in 1957, was at the forefront of a revolution in automotive design. They had recognized the growing demand for high-performance cars, a trend that was just beginning to take off. The D500 was their answer to the growing competition from brands like Chevrolet and Chrysler, who were introducing more powerful and more stylish vehicles. The D500 was an ambitious project meant to take the Dodge brand into the performance car market, combining the luxury of the custom Royal Lancer with a level of power and speed that few other cars could match. The D500 came with a 345 horsepower dual-quad Hemi engine, which was nothing short of impressive for the time. It was a big block engine capable of delivering blistering acceleration and top speeds that were on par with some of the best muscle cars of the era. But it wasn't just the engine that set the D500 apart. Dodge had outfitted the custom Royal Lancer with everything that was flashy and new. The design, with its signature tail fins, gave it an unmistakable look. The lines were sharp and the chrome accents gleamed. Inside, the car was appointed with all the luxury features of a top-tier vehicle, from plush seating to premium materials. But at its heart, the D500 was built to perform. It could go from 0 to 60 in no time, and its engine made a sound that was as aggressive as the car's appearance. It was a true performance vehicle wrapped in the trappings of 1950s luxury. However, there was a problem. The timing of the D500's introduction couldn't have been worse. Dodge, and the automotive market in general, was still grappling with shifting consumer tastes and rising concerns over fuel economy. The gas crises and increasing costs were looming just on the horizon, and cars like the D500 were seen as more of a liability than an asset. Despite its technical achievements, Dodge struggled to find a market for this bold, high-powered vehicle. The cost of the D500 was also a barrier. Most buyers were put off by the high price tag, especially considering the car's flashier, more ostentatious features. The D500 was too extravagant, too powerful, and too ahead of its time for many consumers, who were more interested in practical, everyday cars than in performance monsters with high fuel consumption. Even more problematic was Dodge's marketing, or rather, the lack of it. While they were putting out a car that could compete with the likes of the Chrysler 300 and the Chevrolet Corvette, they didn't give it the level of attention and promotion needed to make it a household name. The D500 simply didn't have the cachet of the more established performance cars, nor did it benefit from the type of widespread advertising campaign that would have created a buzz. In the eyes of the public, it was an expensive, gas-guzzling luxury car that didn't quite know what it was supposed to be. Performance enthusiasts weren't sure whether it was a serious sports car or just another flashy cruiser. The market at the time was rapidly shifting away from such full-size performance vehicles, and Dodge was caught in a transition period. Muscle cars were just beginning to come into their own, but the real muscle car era was still a couple of years away. By 1958, with rising insurance rates and more stringent emission standards, the writing was on the wall for the D500. Dodge quietly discontinued the model, and the custom Royal Lancer, along with its high-performance variant, was forgotten. The D500 didn't go on to become a lasting part of automotive history, as so many others did. What remained of the D500 after Dodge phased it out was a quiet legacy. While it was never widely popular, those who owned the DD500 were fiercely loyal to it. Mechanics and car enthusiasts who had the privilege of working on these cars speak fondly of the engine, which was an absolute powerhouse for its time. The 345 HP dual-quad Hemi was a sight to behold, producing a raw power that few other cars could match. Despite its size, the car could easily outrun many of its smaller, more nimble competitors, and the thrill of driving it was undeniable. But as with so many great cars that were ahead of their time, the D500's potential was never fully realized. By the time the 1960s rolled around, it was all but forgotten. Fewer than 1,000 units were ever produced, and most of them were either scrapped or rusted away over time. The few remaining examples of the D500 are now incredibly rare. The 1961 Mercury Meteor is a perfect example of a car that arrived too early and left too soon, lost to time and largely forgotten by both car enthusiasts and the public. Mercury, aiming to capture the growing market for mid-size cars, introduced the Meteor in 1961 as part of its strategy to appeal to buyers who wanted something between compact cars and full-size luxury sedans. However, the Meteor's short-lived existence is marked by confusion, mixed marketing, and ultimately, an early departure from the automotive scene. Mercury, a division of Ford, had always positioned itself in the market as a more upscale alternative to its sibling brand. Yet the Meteor was meant to serve a different purpose. It wasn't quite a compact, nor was it quite a full-size luxury car. It was Mercury's attempt to land squarely in the mid-size market, which was rapidly growing in the early 1960s. The Meteor came in several configurations, including 2- and 4-door sedans and station wagons, and offered a range of V8 engines for those looking for performance. It was a decent car, well-built with a solid design and a respectable list of features for its time. The Meteor, however, failed to find its identity in a market that was rapidly changing. Car buyers were confused about what exactly the Meteor was supposed to be. Was it a compact, an economy car, or a luxury sedan? The marketing didn't help matters. It wasn't the sleek, sporty car that the youthful buyers of the era were seeking, nor did it offer the upscale luxury that Mercury had built its reputation on. Instead, it landed somewhere in the middle, without a clear sense of purpose or market position. Its awkward identity made it hard for consumers to relate to the car, and sales suffered as a result. In 1963, only 2 years after it was introduced, Mercury quietly killed the Meteor. The car had never gained the kind of traction that its makers had hoped for. Some may have considered it a victim of poor timing, as it was launched right before the mid-1960s muscle car boom, when the American public's attention was shifting toward powerful, sporty vehicles with aggressive styling. The Meteor was just too subdued and practical to compete with that growing wave of performance-oriented cars. By the time Mercury had decided to retire the Meteor, the brand was moving in a different direction, focusing more on larger, more luxurious models like the Monterey and the Cougar. In Canada, the Meteor name made a brief return in the mid-1960s, but by then the car's reputation had already been sealed as a failure in the US market. Even though the Meteor was still sold in Canada for a short time, it never regained the popularity or significance it had hoped for when it first debuted. It was a short-lived experiment that failed to leave a lasting impression on the automotive world. Those who had the chance to own a 1961 Mercury Meteor recall a solid but unremarkable car. As one old-timer shared, "I had one. It wasn't bad, but nobody else wanted one." People always said, "Meteor? Never heard of it." The Meteor didn't have the flashiness of its competitors, nor did it have a legacy that kept it in the public consciousness. It was a victim of market timing and identity confusion, and despite its decent engineering, it was quickly overshadowed by more popular and more clearly defined models. Today, the Meteor is almost completely forgotten, one of those cars that gets lost in the shuffle of history. Few examples have survived, and those that have are largely left to the mercy of time. When you see one at a car show, it's often more of a curiosity than a classic. It's a reminder of a time when Mercury tried something different, but ultimately couldn't make it stick. The Meteor's legacy is one of missed potential, a car that could have been, but never was. It was too early for its time, and by the time the market was ready for it, it had already faded into obscurity. Looking back, it's hard not to feel a little sympathy for the Meteor. It wasn't a bad car, but it simply came at the wrong moment. In a world where mid-sized sedans were just beginning to find their footing, the Meteor didn't stand out enough to carve its own niche. If it had arrived a few years later with better marketing, or perhaps a clearer sense of purpose, it could have found its place in the American automotive landscape. Instead, it remains one of the forgotten oddities of the early 1960s, a name lost to time, and a car that simply never had a chance to shine. The 1974 AMC Matador Coupe stands as one of the most bizarre yet intriguing missteps in American automotive history. A bold departure from AMC's usual family car designs, the Matador Coupe was intended to bring a new level of flair and sophistication to the brand. However, its avant-garde styling and unconventional design made it a polarizing vehicle that few were ready to embrace. In the early 1970s, AMC, an underdog in the American automotive industry, was looking for a way to set itself apart. The Matador, introduced as a coupe variant of the already existing Matador sedan, was part of this attempt to break free from the traditional designs that had long dominated the market. The car was built to offer a blend of European-inspired aesthetics with American muscle, featuring a sleek, angular body and a long, sloping roofline. It had an aggressive yet refined appearance, but its distinctive design wasn't exactly what the typical American car buyer was expecting at the time. For AMC, the Matador Coupe was a bold statement. It was meant to turn heads, and it certainly did, though perhaps not in the way AMC had hoped. The car had the kind of cutting-edge looks that were often seen in European concept cars, but America, particularly in the mid-70s, wasn't ready for such radical design choices. While the Matador Coupe looked modern and futuristic, it struck many as odd and out of place on American roads, particularly in a market where traditional sedans and muscle cars were still the norm. Under the hood, however, the Matador had all the right ingredients to be a legitimate muscle car. It offered a range of powerful engines, including V8 options, and it had the kind of performance that would have satisfied even the most demanding car enthusiasts. In fact, the Matador had some NASCAR success, which demonstrated its potential as a high-performance vehicle. Despite this, its looks were a hard sell for the public, and it quickly became a car that either turned heads for the wrong reasons or would met with outright ridicule. Ex-racers who had the chance to experience the Matador's performance often reflect fondly on the car's capabilities. One former racer recalled, "That Matador had muscle under the hood, but nobody wanted to be seen in it. People either loved it or laughed at it." The car's eccentric styling made it a conversation piece, but for many that conversation was filled with snickers rather than admiration. The Matador Coupe, with its sharp angles and odd proportions, had a futuristic feel, but was so unconventional that it left many buyers confused about what AMC was trying to achieve. The car's sales were dismal, and despite its NASCAR pedigree, the Matador Coupe never gained the popularity AMC had hoped for. In 1974, the American car market was shifting towards more conservative designs, partly due to the oil crisis and rising fuel prices, which made large, gas-guzzling muscle cars less appealing. Buyers were looking for more practical, fuel-efficient vehicles, and the Matador's bold, aggressive design was at odds with the market trends. AMC quickly discontinued the coupe, leaving the sedan version of the Matador to carry on until 1978, while the coupe version faded into obscurity. Even though the Matador Coupe was a commercial failure, it remains a unique and fascinating part of automotive history. Its unconventional styling has gained a sort of cult following in recent years, and some collectors appreciate it for its boldness and rarity. There's a certain nostalgia for cars like the Matador Coupe, which push the boundaries of design in a way that few others dared to. The Matador Coupe's legacy is one of misunderstood ambition. It was a car ahead of its time, designed to offer something different in an industry that was rapidly changing. Its styling was a statement, but unfortunately, it was a statement that the American public wasn't ready to hear. Today, the car stands as a rare oddity, a car that many have forgotten or dismissed, but one that deserves recognition for its audacity and its place in the history of American automotive experimentation. It may have turned heads, but unfortunately, it did so for all the wrong reasons. The Matador Coupe is a symbol of what happens when a brand tries to be too ahead of the curve and fails to connect with its audience. The 1965 Plymouth VIP is one of those forgotten models that tried to carve out a niche in a competitive market, but ended up becoming an afterthought in the face of more established brands. As Plymouth's attempt to elevate their full-size Fury into the realm of luxury cars, the VIP was intended to offer an upscale alternative to the typical muscle and family sedans of the time. Despite its impressive features and styling, the VIP's attempt at luxury fell flat and failed to gain the traction Plymouth had hoped for. Plymouth, at the time, was looking to break into the luxury car market, a space dominated by big names like Pontiac with its Bonneville, Chevrolet with the Caprice, and Buick's full-size models. To compete, they took their already established Fury, a solid full-size sedan, and packed it with all the luxury features they could muster. The result was the Plymouth VIP, which stood for Very Important Plymouth. The car offered a wealth of upscale options, from plush interior trim and premium seating to air conditioning, power windows, and power steering, features that were still seen as high-end luxuries in the mid-60s. However, despite these enhancements, the VIP struggled to make an impression. The problem was twofold. First, the car still felt very much like a Plymouth, not a high-end luxury vehicle. While the VIP had plenty of features and comfort, it lacked the prestige and brand recognition that other luxury models offered. Second, the market for full-size luxury cars was already oversaturated with well-established competition. When consumers thought of a luxury car in the mid-60s, they likely gravitated toward the more prestigious names like Cadillac, Buick, and even Chevrolet with its Caprice. These brands had the cachet and the history to back up their luxury claims, whereas Plymouth's reputation was built on affordability and performance, neither of which made the transition to luxury seamlessly. For many buyers, the idea of a Plymouth VIP simply didn't hold the same appeal as a Caprice or a Bonneville. As a result, sales were slow, and many VIPs sat unsold at dealerships, as one former owner recalls. My dad had a VIP with air and power everything, but at the dealership, it sat unsold forever. People went straight for Chevys. While the VIP was packed with features and looked the part of a luxury sedan, it lacked the prestige that would have made it a more attractive option in a market where name recognition was everything. Another issue with the VIP was that it didn't differentiate itself enough from the base Fury models. The upgrades, while significant, were mostly cosmetic and related to convenience features, air conditioning, plush interiors, and chrome accents. These were all nice, but they didn't add up to the level of luxury buyers expected from a car that was supposed to compete with the likes of the Pontiac Bonneville or Chevrolet Impala. While the Fury had established itself as a reliable, affordable option for American families, the VIP needed something more to elevate it above the competition. Despite its shortcomings, the Plymouth VIP did offer a smooth, comfortable ride with a strong V8 engine that made it a competent performer in its class. It was an enjoyable car to drive, but in the luxury market, that wasn't enough. As sales continued to underperform, Plymouth quietly discontinued the VIP after just a few short years, letting the name fade into obscurity. The luxury sedan segment would eventually be dominated by brands with more heritage in that space, and the VIP was forgotten. Today, the Plymouth VIP is a rare sight, and even when it does show up at classic car shows or auctions, it tends to get overshadowed by its more famous siblings or by other luxury models of the era. Few remember the VIP as a failed experiment from a brand that wasn't quite ready to take on the luxury market, and fewer still appreciate the car for what it tried to achieve. It remains a quirky footnote in Plymouth's history, a car that was ambitious but ultimately misplaced in a world of more powerful competitors. Despite its lack of success, there's something endearing about the Plymouth VIP. It was an attempt to bridge the gap between affordable, practical cars and the world of high-end luxury sedans. It may not have worked out as Plymouth had hoped, but it represents a time when automakers were willing to take risks in the pursuit of growth and prestige. Unfortunately for the VIP, that risk was too much for most buyers, and it quickly faded into the background, overshadowed by the competition it could never quite surpass. The 1970 Buick GS 455 Stage 1 stands as one of the most powerful, yet underappreciated muscle cars of its era. On paper, it had all the right ingredients to compete with the likes of the iconic Chevrolet Chevelle SS and the muscle-bound Mopars. With its massive 455 cubic inch V8 engine, it produced a staggering 510 lb of torque, the highest of any American production car at the time. This made the GS 455 Stage 1 not only a contender, but arguably the strongest muscle car engine on the market in 1970. However, despite its raw power, the GS 455 Stage 1 was often overshadowed by its flashier, more recognizable competitors, and its relatively quiet Buick nameplate hindered its full potential in the eyes of many muscle car enthusiasts. The Buick GS 455 Stage 1's engine was no joke. With 510 lb of torque and 350 horsepower, it outperformed the famous LS6 Chevelle, the muscle car benchmark of the day. While the Chevelle's engine might have been slightly more powerful in terms of raw horsepower at 450 OHP, the Buick's engine was far superior in terms of torque, offering an incredibly muscular 500 Nm that gave it remarkable off-the-line acceleration. When it came to straight-line performance, few could keep up with the GS 455 Stage 1. Its ability to punch through the air was only matched by its incredible brute force. But despite all of this, the Buick didn't have the same reputation as the big names in muscle cars. The Buick GS as a whole was more associated with older buyers looking for comfort and reliability than with performance-oriented enthusiasts. The problem with the GS 455 Stage 1 wasn't its performance, it was the perception surrounding it. Buick, with its image as a more conservative, luxury-oriented brand, wasn't seen as a muscle car powerhouse like Chevrolet or Pontiac. The result? The GS 455 Stage 1 flew under the radar of many muscle car buyers. While its competitors like the Chevelle, GTO, and Charger had the visual swagger and a more aggressive image, the Buick was less flashy and often overlooked. The car's exterior styling, while attractive and muscular, didn't scream performance. It didn't have the boldness of a big, brash muscle car like the Hemi Cuda or the Charger RT. Instead, the GS 455 Stage 1's understated design caused many to mistakenly assume it was just another luxury cruiser for older buyers, a far cry from the high-performance beast that roared off the streets. But those who knew what the GS 455 Stage 1 was capable of were in for a surprise. As one former owner recalls, people saw a grandma car until I floored it, then they saw my taillights. Beneath the hood, the GS 455 Stage 1 was a beast in disguise. Once the accelerator was pressed, the engine roared to life, throwing the car forward with authority. It was a sleeper, a car that hid its ferocity behind an unassuming exterior, letting its performance speak for itself. It could embarrass more famous muscle cars in a straight line, but few knew it was lurking beneath the Buick badge. Despite its impressive performance, the Buick GS 455 Stage 1 was limited in its production, with only a few thousand units sold. By the time it arrived on the scene, the muscle car era was already in its twilight. The early 70s saw a rise in insurance premiums and a tightening of emissions regulations, which were putting a damper on the industry as a whole. By 1971, General Motors had started to pull back from offering high-performance options in many of its cars in response to the changing market and regulatory pressures. As a result, the GS 455 Stage 1's time in the spotlight was short-lived, and it was eventually phased out, its potential untapped by the broader muscle car community. The GS 455 Stage 1 remains one of the forgotten greats of American muscle cars. While it wasn't produced in large numbers, and its reputation was hampered by the Buick badge, the car's performance still holds up to this day. For those who had the privilege of owning or driving one, the experience was unforgettable. The car's raw torque, stealthy power, and surprising speed made it a true muscle car in every sense of the word, but its quiet and understated nature meant it never gained the fame or following it deserved. Now the GS 455 Stage 1 is a rare find, and those who come across one are usually met with disbelief at just how much performance is hiding under the hood. Today, it stands as one of the best-kept secrets of the muscle car world, a powerhouse that, if given the attention it deserved, might have gone down in history as one of the all-time greats. The 1968 Chevrolet Biscayne L72 427 is a classic example of a sleeper muscle car, a vehicle that looked as plain and unassuming as any other full-size sedan of the era, but packed an unexpected and brutal performance punch under the hood. The Biscayne, typically seen as a family car or a fleet vehicle, was not meant for the performance crowd. It had no badges to advertise its strength, no flashy styling cues to alert passers-by to its true potential. Yet, if you knew what to ask for at the Chevrolet dealership, you could walk away with one of the most potent, low-key performance cars of its time. Chevy offered the Biscayne L72 427 as a base, no-frills sedan, but for those in the know, it was possible to order it with the mighty 427 cubic inch L72 big block V8. This engine, cranking out 425 horsepower, was essentially the same power plant used in the Chevrolet Corvette and other high-performance models. Despite the engine's formidable capabilities, the Biscayne's exterior remained as plain as day. No bold stripes, no racing decals, just the bare-bones, utilitarian design of a car meant for work, not speed. Chevrolet didn't make a big deal about this performance option. It wasn't advertised, and for the average car buyer, the idea of a full-size sedan being equipped with a 425 HP engine was simply unthinkable. It was almost a secret weapon, a car that could easily slip under the radar while delivering blistering acceleration and impressive quarter-mile times. This made the Biscayne L72 427 a favorite among drag racers and enthusiasts who wanted a powerful car that would catch others off guard. After all, who would expect a family sedan to smoke a Pontiac GTO, the muscle car king of the time? As one drag strip legend recalls, they didn't even have carpet, but they'd eat GTOs for breakfast. Nobody believed a Biscayne could move like that. This quote perfectly captures the essence of the Biscayne L72 427. Its unassuming utilitarian appearance contrasted sharply with its raw, unfiltered power. On the drag strip, this car would leave many muscle cars in the dust, proving that looks could be deceiving. While GTOs and other muscle cars had a reputation for speed and power, the Biscayne was the unexpected contender. Its massive torque and sheer horsepower made it a formidable opponent, one that could surprise even the most seasoned racers. Despite its performance potential, the Biscayne L72 427 was never produced in large numbers. The combination of its plain appearance and the limited knowledge of its performance option meant that fewer were sold compared to other muscle cars of the time. Chevy built only a small number of these sedans with the L72 427 engine, and even fewer remain today. The lack of flashy styling or distinctive features meant that many of these cars were forgotten or used up, with few surviving the ravages of time. As a result, the 1968 Chevrolet Biscayne L72 427 has become one of the most elusive and intriguing muscle cars from the late 1960s. It's a hidden gem in the world of performance cars, something that, for many, is remembered only in legend. While it may never have had the widespread fame of its muscle car cousins, the Biscayne L72 427's combination of surprising stealth and brutal power gives it a special place in automotive history. Today, finding one of these cars in good condition is a rare occurrence, And when one does surface, it's a testament to the performance that was once quietly hiding behind the simple, workmanlike exterior. For those who had the privilege of driving one, the 1968 Chevrolet Biscayne L72 427 remains a reminder of a time when muscle cars could be built for the everyman, not with flash and flair, but with raw, unadulterated power. The 1963 Studebaker Avanti R2 is often regarded as one of the most forward-thinking and innovative cars ever produced in America. An eccentric blend of raw performance, futuristic design, and audacious ambition. This vehicle, which came to life just as Studebaker was on the verge of collapse, is both a testament to what the company could have been and a reminder of how sometimes the automotive world doesn't appreciate greatness until it's too late. The story of the Avanti begins in the early 1960s when Raymond Loewy, one of the most famous industrial designers of the time, was tasked with creating a vehicle that would give Studebaker a new lease on life. Loewy, known for his work on the streamlined design of the Studebaker Commander and the iconic Coca-Cola bottle, set out to create a high-performance, luxury coupe that would rival the best American and European offerings. The result was the Studebaker Avanti, which made its debut in 1962 as a stunning example of innovation. But the R2 variant, introduced in 1963, would raise the stakes even higher. The heart of the Avanti R2 was its engine, a supercharged 289 cubic inch V8, which gave it a competitive edge in the performance car market. The engine was built by Paxton, a company that had already made a name for itself in supercharging technology, and it produced around 275 horsepower. Enough to send the Avanti R2 from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just under 6 seconds, which was a remarkable feat for the time. For comparison, that was on par with many of the best sports cars of the era, including the Chevrolet Corvette. This performance, combined with a 4-speed manual transmission, allowed the R2 to hold its own against the top muscle cars and sports coupes of the day. It wasn't just a car that looked fast, it was a genuine performer. But the Avanti R2 wasn't just about power, it was about breaking the mold. One of the most striking features of the car was its body, which was made entirely of fiberglass. This was an unusual move for an American manufacturer at the time, but it helped to keep the weight down and improve performance. The fiberglass was expertly crafted to form a smooth, sleek, and futuristic body shape that looked like something out of the jet age. The front grille was oval, distinctive, and almost alien in its design, while the rear featured a unique fastback design that gave the car an almost spaceship-like quality. The exterior was so radical that it turned heads wherever it went, and it was clear from the moment it was unveiled that the Avanti was unlike anything that had come before it in the American market. Inside the cabin, the design followed the same forward-thinking philosophy. The dashboard was inspired by aviation, featuring round concentric dials that looked more like something you'd see in a cockpit than a car. The minimalist interior design emphasized function over fluff, with a layout that made the driver feel more like a pilot than a motorist. The upholstery was luxurious but simple, and the overall aesthetic was clean and modern, emphasizing the car's performance-first mentality. But there was still a certain elegance to it, a sophistication that was rare for a company that was struggling as much as Studebaker was at the time. Despite its groundbreaking design, however, the Avanti R2 was born into a market that just wasn't ready for it. Studebaker, which had long been a beloved American brand, was facing financial turmoil by the early 1960s. In fact, the company's financial troubles were so severe that its U.S. production plants would close within a year of the R2's release. The car's unusual design, especially its fiberglass body and space-age styling, left potential buyers uncertain about what to make of it. In addition, the price tag of around $4,000, which was considerable for a car of its time, meant that many buyers looked elsewhere, often toward the more traditional and well-established American and European manufacturers. As a result, only around 1,200 R2 models were produced before Studebaker ceased production in December of 1963. The Avanti, along with Studebaker's other models, was abruptly discontinued, and the company shut down its U.S. operations. As a result, the R2 became one of the rarest and most coveted models in American automotive history, particularly among collectors who appreciate its unique place in history. For years, the Avanti R2 was a mystery to most people. Its design was so far ahead of its time that it was almost too radical to be appreciated in the 1960s. The American public wasn't ready for a car that looked like it belonged in the future, and as a result, it was often dismissed or forgotten. By the time the 1960s came to a close, the R2 had become just another footnote in the annals of American automotive history. Beautiful, powerful, but ultimately a product of a company that could not overcome its own financial collapse. The 1955 Hudson Italia is one of those rare automotive gems that seemingly came from nowhere, yet left an indelible mark on the world of classic cars. Designed by the renowned Italian coach builder Touring of Milan, the Italia was Hudson's attempt to create a limited-run halo car that would elevate the brand's image and create a vehicle of exceptional performance and striking design. With only 26 examples produced, the Hudson Italia was an exclusive marvel, an automotive anomaly that combined the flair of Italian design with American engineering. But despite its stunning looks and innovative design, it was a car that never truly found its audience, and its legacy faded into obscurity far too quickly. The Italia's origins lie in Hudson's desire to compete with the European sports car market, which was dominated by Italian and British marques. The company was struggling to maintain relevance in the American market, especially as other automakers had long since moved on to more modern designs. To remedy this, Hudson approached Touring, the same design house that had created the famous bodywork for Ferrari, Maserati, and Alfa Romeo. Touring's Superleggera method of lightweight construction, which involved a delicate framework covered in aluminum panels, was used to create the Italia's body. This was a high-end process that was usually reserved for the finest and most expensive sports cars of the day, and it gave the Italia a sleek, low-slung profile that made it stand out from the crowd. The Italia's design was bold and progressive, embodying the elegant yet aggressive Italian sports car aesthetic. The long hood, curved fenders, and fastback roofline were all hallmarks of mid-century European styling, but the Italia's design was particularly refined. The front end featured an aerodynamic grille with sharp lines, and the tail section was characterized by wide, flared fenders that emphasized the car's stance and performance potential. Inside, the body was as luxurious as it was sporty, with sumptuous leather upholstery and a dashboard that was both functional and artistically arranged. In many ways, the Italia looked like a car straight out of a post-war European dream, sleek, seductive, and sophisticated. Beneath the hood, the Hudson Italia was powered by Hudson's 2 cubic inch straight-six engine, which was mated to a 3-speed manual transmission. While not as powerful as the V8 engines used by some of its competitors, the Italia's lightweight construction gave it a performance advantage. The car's compact size and aerodynamic design made it a nimble and quick machine, capable of impressive acceleration and handling for its time. It wasn't just about power, it was about balance and driving experience, and the Italia delivered on both fronts. However, the Italia was never going to be an easy sell. Priced higher than a Cadillac or a Packard, it was a luxury car from a company with little brand recognition. At the time, Hudson was already struggling to compete against the giants of Detroit, and the Italia's price tag made it even less accessible to the average consumer. To make matters worse, the American market wasn't particularly interested in small European-style sports cars when muscle cars and larger, more traditional American sedans were dominating the scene. The Italia's Italian elegance and European charm were out of step with the tastes of the average American buyer, who was more inclined to buy something big and powerful, not small and exotic. Adding to the car's misfortune was the fact that Hudson itself was on the brink of collapse. In 1954, Hudson merged with Nash to form American Motors Corporation, owned AMC, a move that led to the swift discontinuation of many of the brand's more ambitious projects, including the Italia. Despite its beauty and potential, the Italia was not part of AMC's future vision, and production of the car was halted almost immediately after the merger. The 26 Hudson Italias that had been built were all that ever would be made, and the car faded into obscurity almost as quickly as it had arrived. Today, the Hudson Italia is a rare and highly coveted collector's item. Its value lies not just in its low production numbers, but in its status as an automotive curiosity. For many years, the Italia was virtually unknown outside of niche circles, overshadowed by more famous Italian and American sports cars. However, as collectors and car enthusiasts have become more interested in obscure, limited production vehicles, the Italia has seen a resurgence in appreciation. The car's sleek lines, exotic origins, and unique place in automotive history have made it one of the most sought-after cars from the 1950s. For those lucky enough to see one in person, the Italia still has the ability to turn heads and spark conversation. Its design is timeless, still exuding the same aura of elegance and performance that it did when it was first revealed. Yet, even with its undeniable appeal,